everyone, and welcome to Thinkr Out Loud, a podcast series by Thinkr Marketing Group. Here we'll chat about the top tips, tricks, and trends in the marketing world. We'll share insights from some of our in-house experts to help you understand the many moving pieces of a marketing strategy and how they work together. My name is Shalynn Hamilton, and I'm the Business Development Manager at Thinkr Marketing. With me in the booth is our CEO, Aldert van Nieuwkoop.
Well pronounced. Thank you very much, Shalynn. I'm glad to be here.
Ooh, I practiced.
All right. Good for you.
Well, thank you very much for sitting down with us, Aldert. I'm really happy to kick this off with you as our very first guest. You are an expert in branding and brand strategy, and that's what we recently released on the blog is a little bit more about that. So today, let's dive into why is branding important? What is a brand? What are all the pieces that make up a brand? And why is it so important for every style of business?
Golly, that's a very large question.
It is.
But let's just, break it down. Let's start with the brand itself. So the brand itself is the kind of jewel in the crown. I mean, that is the asset that you have. So that consists of the brand elements, and the brand elements are your logo, your colors, your brand colors that you use, any shapes, word marks, tagline, all these little pieces that form your brand, that is visible, that is you can hear, see, smell. So you need to develop that brand to be able to speak to and create a reaction with your target audiences. And then the next step in after you've created that brand is the branding piece. And the branding is really where you make that brand stand out. And you have tactics, you have a strategy, you run campaigns, you do whatever it takes to get this brand top of mind with the target audience that you're after.
Whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes. So that's the branding. So the brand is where it all starts. And so, it's your identity, it's what people recognize you by, it's an asset that you develop. Think of, brands like Coca-Cola or like McDonald's or Mercedes or any of these big brands that you'll recognize just by even seeing the color yellow and red together. You'll know that's McDonald's. Or you see a piece of the arch, you'll know that's McDonald's. Or you see the Mercedes star, and you'll know it's Mercedes. So they've done a really, really good job in bringing that brand top of mind in their audiences, and they'll resonate and they'll think of you and your company and the product that you provide when they see that piece of that brand.
Right, they've done it really well. That kind of makes me think of a good question, though. We do often think of brands and branding for bigger companies, bigger brands, or more consumer-facing brands. But how does it apply, and why is it important for smaller businesses or maybe B2B businesses?
Branding or a brand, a personality, a voice that is recognizable is even more important for smaller companies because the competition is often fiercer. I mean, imagine being a landscaper and you work in the Hamilton area. There's lots of landscaping companies out there, but if your trucks and if your equipment has the right decals, has the right brand that people will remember when they see you mowing a lawn with your equipment out there, when they then come to a point in time where they need a landscaper, they'll remember your brand. They'll remember the colors that you had. They remember that that picture will come up in their heads, and they will call you. So even for small companies, B2B companies, it is extremely important to have that identity, to have that personality, to have that that representative image in the heads of people be top of mind.
Sure. There's a lot of pieces, a lot of moving pieces to a brand, it sounds like. And from what I'm understanding, they really do all have to work together. But how do you get there? How do you define those pieces and build that identity?
Well, you need a brand strategy. So it's quite an involved path. It starts with obviously your business plan. If you're a startup, what are your goals? What is your vision? What are you trying to achieve? What is your mission? What is your short-term mission and what is your long-term vision of where you want to be, and then you formulate that into different elements in order to be able to achieve that. And brand and branding is part of that.
Is all part of the mix.
So does your brand, does your logo, does your identity personify your mission and your vision? Does it really speak that or not, or is it disconnected? So these are pretty important steps that you have to make in your journey to establish and grow your company, and brand and branding and creating that identity is extremely important in that whole process. So strategy is part of that. Where are you today? How are you going to get to where you want to be in terms of branding and your brand? But not just externally, but also internally.
So tell me about that.
Well, you can imagine that if you work for a corporation, that you will be you'll feel part of the family when you have something that you can be proud of. You're doing your job and it's working and the company is successful and you're happy to be there. And so what anchor do you have to concentrate that energy towards? I mean, that's a brand. If you work for a company that has no identity, then you miss that connection as an employee. So that cultural that you create within an organization is very much related to a brand. So yes, it's very important to have a strong identity, not just for the external market, but also for your employees and for and the value you create within your organization. That brand equity that you build up is worth a lot of money. So think about if you need a tissue, most people will call it a Kleenex. And that's because Kleenex has been able to really strongly associate what they do, what they produce, tissues, with their name. That's true. It's so top of mind in our heads that we think about Kleenex as a tissue. Band-Aids is the same thing. Think
Q-tip, I think of Q-tip too.
Think about these things where they've done an extremely good job in branding themselves that, in the general public, when they think about the use of a particular item, they think about the brand name. Well, kudos to them. They've done a really good job.
They have done a very good job. You said something earlier that kind of hit, and I think it's true across all marketing, but it does start with the brand and with branding, and that's connection. It's building that story and telling that story through all the elements you mentioned earlier by making sure your vision and mission are clear, all your visual and other elements support that vision and mission and tell that story. Would you agree that your brand really is just the personification of the story of your business?
Absolutely. There's always a story, and not a lot of people want to tell their story, or it doesn't come out properly. But the story is something that really works well with your audiences because they can relate to it. Maybe I can tell you a little bit about our story.
Yes, please. Tell us about Thinkr.
Thinkr used to be called Albanese Branding and Communications, and when I took over the agency back in 2015, Mr. Albanese had started this agency back in the 90s, and he's gone. He's retired. So there was no need for us to keep that name. There was equity built up in the name Albanese, but we had to have a fresh start, and we had to come up with a new name. I didn't want to have my name on the building. So I didn't start the agency.
It would be misspelled quite often if that was the case.
Absolutely, yes. It's a tough name. So we had to come up with a different name, and we went through rounds and rounds of thinking of new names, and when I talked to my team, and there was something that perhaps we didn't really got right as far as our brainstorm or thinking process is concerned, I would ask them to have a thinker about it, and say, hey, instead of saying, well, that's really bad, no. Hey, have a thinker about that. Let's look at it from a different perspective. Let's revisit this and see if we can come up with some alternatives. So that expression stuck with my folks, and that name ended up on the board together with many, many other names. And, you know, we went through various rounds of you know, what really represents us, what we do, and how, you know, how do we define it, and what word do we use, and so forth. And the name Thinkr just kept on staying at the top of the list. And at the end of the day, we said, you know, that's it. I mean, that's our name, because we think, we use our heads.
Yeah.
We have different perspectives. We have different team members that come up with, you know, different ideas. And we really think about how do we get our clients to get the most out of their marketing. And so we are thinkers, and we're doers, of course, as well. But yeah, we found that we thought it was a cute name. It resonates with what we do. I had 3 criteria. One is I don't want my name on the building. 2 is it has to have something to do with what we do.
Yeah.
And thirdly, and you know, that would be a bonus. If it brings a smile to your face, then that's even better. So I think the name Thinkr brings all these 3 things to the table, and that's why we chose it.
Oh, it is fantastic. And you're right, it does really embody what we do. We think about things, we think first, we're research focused and strategy driven, and it certainly fits, and it's a philosophy that's pretty easy to remember.
Yeah.
And the visuals for it, that came next, right? You built on that after kind of you settled on the name?
Yes. Brand color, of course, is very important in all of this. It's one of the brand elements. You know, McDonald's has yellow and red. Yellow and red stand for fun, for fresh, for good resonation. Banks, often you'll see they'll have the color blue because it's conservative and it's traditional. So we wanted a color that that was a little different perhaps and stood out. And I'm from the Netherlands originally, so I like oranges, and we are associated with oranges in the Netherlands. So the orange color was an obvious choice for us to pick.
There you go. Your name's not on the building, but you're still part of the brand.
A little bit. We want a little bit of Dutchness in there.
That's fair.
And I love the color. It's a great color for a brand.
It is. It feels creative and bright and full of energy. Even in our big space upstairs, it's a lot of orange, which it's not the best color on everyone, but on a wall, it's fantastic.
It looks good.
That's a very nice story. Thank you. What advice would you give to a business owner who's trying to go through that process to either rebrand or start fresh? And where and how do they start?
Well, obviously they have to go through the process, whether it's in their heads or whether they make it more formal in terms of, what is your mission, what is your vision, where do you see your company go, what do you stand for, what does your culture represent within your organization, because we firmly believe that a brand needs to represent that. You can't just have a brand completely disassociated with really how you are within your organization. It doesn't work. It will come out at the end of the day.
That's true.
So you have to be true to your brand, and but it starts with really defining yourself of what is important to you. What are your brand elements? What are your pillars? What do you represent? And going through that exercise, which we help companies with, you'll come out at the other end with a number of key aspects that you'll want to have that brand represent. And those you need to bring out in developing that brand. So, we help people do that, whether it is a logo, a word mark, or a jingle, or a tagline. We help folks with going through that whole process of thinking through, what your brand needs to represent and what will resonate with your target markets that you're trying to have your brand stand out for. So a plan is important. You need to plan that. You need to strategize that. You need to have, a roadmap of how you get to the point that you wish to be at. Depends on the industry, of course. Depends on your competition. So there's definitely some research involved in terms of how do you position. You don't want to look exactly the same as your nearest competitor.
That's an interesting point too. You mentioned competition. So we're talking about bringing out the brand personality and telling your story, which is totally unique to each business and to the culture it has. How does that play into competition and positioning yourself?
Well, you need to do your research, obviously. You need to find out how you differentiate yourself with your competition. What are you good at? What makes you better? What do you as a company and as a culture within that company feel that makes you stand out. Because that's really what will be noticeable for an evaluator that's looking at buying your services or your product. What will make that person decide you over a competitor,
to choose you
over a competitor. So that's really important to make that visible, to make it clear within the audiences that you're trying to address.
Are there any brands that you see kind of now out in the wild who are embodying the full story of their brand and really standing out against the competition? Are they doing it in creative ways?
Oh gosh, there's so many brands out there, but some of the brands that I admire, and maybe a bit cliche, but I do admire Apple. I think they've done and I look then over a longer period of time. When Apple Macintosh started, they were up against Microsoft and still are, which is a mammoth. And Apple over the decades has been able to really cut into their market share. And they did that through obviously great technology, really solid, strong technology, and perhaps a bit more user friendly compared to the Microsoft. I'm biased. I'm a Mac guy, so I apologize for all you Windows users.
But, first podcast, and we said it. Andrew's going to be so upset.
But I'm just used to, and I used to be on Windows before the Macs really were out there. I'm an older guy. But I do love my Mac, and they've done a fantastic job in evolving their brand over time to stay in tune with what's happening in the marketplace, with what their audiences are demanding for, and in spite of their high price, they are able to really still capture a large piece of that market. So I admire that. I love their logo. We want to bite of the apple. We want a piece of that market. I think it's smart, and it resonates. It stays in your head. You recognize it with anything. Immediately that's Apple. So I admire them. Another brand that I admire are the Raptors. And why is because the Raptors are part of the NBA, which is a massive organization, really U.S. based, with massive sponsorship in the United States and massive audiences that are really basketball enthusiasts, and they have been able to pivot their brand in such a way that they play on that fan base here in Canada, because we Canadians, we always feel a little bit underdoggy, with the United States. We do, I mean, that's...
It's part of the Canadian brand, I think.
It's part of the Canadian brand. They're a massive, large economy that we heavily depend on and appreciate. But at the same time, we're proud of our own achievements, We're Canadians. So they've been able to kind of really play a little bit on that we the North, this branding of, we may be small, we may be your northern neighbors, but we still are capable, and they've proven that. They're not backed up by massive sponsorship, obviously outside of the NBA, but they've done very, very well, and they became the champions. So I think that's a massive achievement. I think that's really, really cool.
I think so too. And with both brands that you mentioned, there was a thread that I noticed, and it was the evolution of those brands. So if a business is spending the time and establishing who they are, and even those visual elements, what happens when it's time to pivot and time to evolve? Do you start all over, or
rebrand?
Or what's important to carry with you through that process?
Yeah, I mean, it's a process that we go through often with our clients. People get very attached to their brand, particularly their callers. And we've had clients that came to us and says, we need to do something. We know we need to do something, but we really love our callers. And I can think of a few companies that we had to have some pretty long discussions with and tweak. Still kind of keeping, the original thought or feeling, but really kind of changing it up so that it speaks to this new audience that has now evolved. And so it's a process. We don't often change a brand completely.
Yeah.
We very often just tweak it, and it's quite a process to go through. And you may not see a huge amount of differences, but there are. And the end result is, speaks for itself.
Are there flags or markers that business owners should note that kind of signal that it might be time to think about a refresh or a rebrand?
It's sensitive,
It is.
Like, it's hard to tell. We have a few clients there. We really want them to change their logo.
Sure.
And it's, like I said, it's a process. It's an education as well. But, practical things play a role in that. Is it scalable? Does it look good in black and white? Does it look good on a computer? I mean, some of these logos have been developed in the 70s or the 60s, and we didn't really have any computers. So does it look good digitally or on a mobile device? So, these are practical things that we can bring forward for them to pay attention to and go, okay, yeah, no, I get it. Does it have a lot of little detail that you can't see because it's so detailed? So it's not scalable. So, there's quite a few things that we have in our tool bag to convince, owners or companies to change some of their elements of their branding.
And like you said, usually you kind of know that there's something that needs to change.
Yes.
And you can carry parts of that story because who you are really has evolved with you, and it's just retelling that story in a fresh way.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. So, Aldert, before we wrap things up, I want people to get to know you a little bit. So, name 3 things you cannot live without.
Okay, well, I'm a fairly practical guy, so I know I can live without pretty well anything other than love, of course, and my family and so forth. But for me, it's like water, air, and food. I can't live without those 3 things. I mean, that's that's as simple as it is.
There
right?
it is, Mr. Practical. Okay. What is your perfect cup of coffee?
Oh golly. Well, yeah, I do I like ouzo.
Mm-hmm.
But I only like that because I associate it with being in Greece and sitting out on a beautiful island. And it only tastes good when I drink ouzo in Greece. And it's a long time ago that I drank that, but it's still in my memory bank, as a brand should be. So coffee, for me, my ideal cup of coffee would be sitting on a hot terrace somewhere, in the Mediterranean, in Italy, having a cappuccino. Strong cappuccino with a bit of cinnamon on top, sprinkled on top, and a biscotti on the side. That would be a perfect cup of coffee for me.
It does sound perfect. We'll have to deal with the Nespresso for now until we can get over
Good
it.
second. Really good second. Yeah.
And I guess finally, a nonprofit or a charity that you're very fond of.
I actually am fond is maybe not the right word, but I admire the UNHCR. And the reason why I admire the UNHCR is because they fight the plight of refugees. Mm-hmm. And, I cannot imagine what it would be like to be a person without an identity. And we're talking about branding, we're talking about identity, but being an individual that has no knowledge of where they were born, when they were born, how old they are. They have no documentation, no paperwork, no passport, no identity. So you're stuck in a refugee camp. You can't get out because you have nothing to identify yourself with. And the UNHCR tries to help those folks. And that's something I admire.
What a worthy cause. Well, Aldert, thank you very much
All right.
for being our first guest on the Thinkr Out Loud podcast. We're over. Thank you very much for being in the booth with us. And listeners, thank you for tuning in. To learn more, check out the blog that Aldert has written on the website, thinkrmarketing.com. And if you have any questions or want to chat further with any one of our experts, including Aldert, give us a call or send us an email or use the contact form on the website. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Shalynn. Great job.